Hey everybody, welcome back to Grover, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Big thank you to Main Street for including us in this First Friday activity. Today what we thought we would do is get out of the museum and into the community a little bit and show you some historic sites along the Blue River Trail. With that being said, one of the things that we're going to be doing in the next couple weeks kind of ties into this trail tour. We're going to be exploring an outdoor scavenger hunt, so we'll post description on some of the locations where it'll say, you know, this happened here, or we'll have a photograph, and you'll have to find that. And if you just comment where it's at, or if you send us a message, we'll enter you in a drawing for an item in our gift shop down the line here. Now, this is only going to be part one of it, so it's only going to go from Haybig to the Porter Center. We'll have the other leg down the line here. Let us know if you like this one in the comments, though, and we'll definitely get right on that. If you want more descriptions or more information on any of the stops along the trail, you'll find that in the description or in the comments below. We really hope that you enjoyed today's tour. Stay healthy, stay well, and we look forward to seeing you out there. So our journey today actually begins at the end of this leg of the trail on River Road. And River Road was built in 1951 by the Shelbyville Streets Department. And its purpose was to connect Harrison to the old Franklin Road. And what's really cool about the old Franklin Road is that was actually the location of the very first furniture factory built here in Shelbyville. So Shelbyville down the line, of course, gets known for its producing of furniture across the United States. But it all begins with this factory, the Conrey, Waller, and DePrez factory. It was also known as the Blue River Furniture Factory, and it starts in 1875. By 1886, they actually had 120 employees, and I think it's worth noting as we begin this bike journey, right, or this trail, that in the 1890s, so shortly after they hit their sort of peak, we have the very first bicycles hitting the streets of Shelbyville. The next spot on our journey brings us to the Babe Ruth baseball fields. These fields actually opened in 1970 as the Not Whole League Park, and it was owned and operated by the Jaycees. In 1983, they changed the name to the Babe Ruth Park, and in 1984-85, they actually held the very first Bambino World Series. Alright, so this next location sort of is sort of arbitrary, but bear with me, I promise it all connects. So while the historic thing didn't happen here, it could have happened here, and it has two things going for it for us choosing this location. One, it's along the Blue River, and two, there's a boat loading dock just off the way here, and so that's why we chose this next one. In 1885, Shelbyville, believe it or not, actually had steamboats going up and down Blue River here. One of the first operations was owned by a guy named Captain Bailey, and he would run these boats from Freeport down to Shelbyville and back again. However, while Captain Bailey is the first person that we have a name for, these actually started all the way back in 1878. Parks, like this one right here, were made possible because in 1909, Shelbyville developed something called the Shelbyville Park System. This was sort of the predecessor to the modern day Shelbyville Parks Department. over the first few years, they kind of got their feet under them, got a board of directors, and eventually added more parks into their system. We'll talk about some of those parks further on our journey, but this one, Sunset Park, was added in 1955. So the next area I wanted to talk about, I know isn't directly on the trail, but it is near it. You can definitely see it when you're going along the trail, and I'd be really remiss if I didn't talk about it for just a little bit at least, mostly because it's so significant in Shelbyville's early history. For starters, it was a donated part of the land by somebody that, you know, we deal a lot with in our history books. So first, the donated land. There are three people in Shelbyville that made this place possible, and that was Jamison, Hendricks, and Walker. Out of Davison's land, Arthur Major came along and purchased a piece of that, and then donated it, turned it over to the city for the purpose of making a burial ground. If you were to walk through the city cemetery, almost every name that you see in here, these last names, would come up time and time again. Alright, so our next stop today brings us to the Blue River. We want to focus in on it, and specifically an event that happened on it in 1913. In 1913, after months of rain and freezing temperatures in January and February, the city was hit with just an onslaught of rain over the course of 2 days. And on March 25th, 1913, the Blue River rose to such a degree that it actually went over the embankments and started flooding the city. There was 2.5 water at some of the deepest points on the roads, sitting on the roads, and it was referred to in one text as boating territory. You can only get your boats through there. There was no wagons being taken through there. The devastation was so significant that one gentleman in a letter had written after seeing the way that the sidewalks were blown apart, the way that outhouses were sitting up on people's porches, that mud was caked everywhere. He said that he doesn't know how the city could ever make it right again. And I think it's pretty significant as we reflect on that, to now have a walking trail along this river that once ravaged and wreaked such havoc on our city here. Said that there were three people that made Shelbyville possible, that made Shelbyville the county seat. And those were Davison, Hendricks, and then the third person that we're going to be focusing in on is a guy named John Walker. Mr. Walker had donated 10 acres of land in those early years to make Shelbyville the county seat. He had a series or a number of other landholds, and one of them was actually right along Blue River here. On that land, he had founded the Walker Mill, one of the very first, or what is believed to be the very first mill here in Shelby County. Later, that mill becomes the Shelby Mill. And two stories that we really wanted to hone in on to kind of talk about the man that was John Walker. Not only was he charitable in the idea of giving land to make this place possible, but there were two instances that were sort of noted as important to his generosity. And the one actually happens right here in Shelbyville. And that is when he donates land, after he donates land, he makes the mill, and then a few years later, Shelbyville actually goes through a famine. And it's during that famine that John Walker steps up to the plate and really helps the community out. The famine was caused, believe it or not, by an infestation of squirrels, as it says in the early newspapers there. And John Walker, seeing that there was kind of a struggle being caused in his local community, held back the grain in his own mill that he would be making money on, and donated it and gave it at a low price to various community members who otherwise couldn't have afforded it or would starve. And those community members not only were able to use it to get them through that year, but then plant the grain the following year. In another story, I said there was two. In another story, after John Walker had moved away from Shelbyville, there was another landhold that he had, and there was a bidding war going on. And a woman was currently bidding. She was a recent widow, and she was bidding on this land. And somebody stepped up and started bidding against her, driving up the price. And John Walker stepped up to the plate and said that whoever it is that is bidding against this woman, this widowed woman, will have to contend to me. And so these two kind of instances, the woman actually ended up getting land. These two instances, along with the land that he donated to the city, kind of highlight the character that was John Walker. Alright, so as you can see, I'm outside of the Porter Center here, another really historic location here in Shelbyville. The Porter Center was actually created in memory of William Porter. This was Enos Porter's son, who had tragically passed away from exhaustion while serving in the military. Enos himself, you might recognize from a partnership that we had discussed in characters in the collection. He worked with Frank Rembush designing mirrors, creating mirrors for furniture companies. Prior to all of that, before he got his start in mirrors, he actually worked with his brother Edwin. They had come to Shelbyville specifically to start a grocery up. Shortly after, him and Rembush got together, started creating these mirrors in 1906, and even a little bit after that, he kind of took over the entirety of the mirror division, while Rembush went on to create the mirrored screens and get involved more with the theaters. This building was made possible through $40,000 donation, and it was designed by a guy named D.A. Boulin. D.A. Boulin is significant here locally for sure, but also around the state of Indiana. On a local level, he was the architect that designed the current City Hall, the current courthouse, the Hamilton House. He designed and built the Major Mansion and Major Hospital. And then as we get out into Indiana, he has a ton of notable works to his name, but some of those names include the Indianapolis City Market, the Crown Hill Gothic Chapel, and the French Lick Spring Hotel. So really cool that we have this piece here in our community.